Today is a very, very special day for me indeed. I normally have a script to introduce our speakers, but this special speaker today requires no script from my side. It's my absolute honor, privilege, and pleasure to be talking to Manoj Chugh, the one and only Manoj Chugh for people who know him. And for the folks who don't, you'll realize over the next 30 minutes why this man is an absolute legend. I've known Manoj Chugh for the last 12 to 13 years, and there's barely a week when I don't think about what would Manoj Chugh do in a situation that I am in. I've learned so much from him, and I know it's not just me. It's so many people who have been touched by the Manoj Chugh factor. Manoj Chugh, of course, has been in the industry for over 4 decades, built businesses from scratch, started off his career in the early days and built the Wipro business across the country, built large multinational corporations in India like Cisco and EMC, has seen the government of India really transform into a strong digital first government over the last 4 decades again. And as they always say, there used to be a famous saying back in the day, EMC would stand for the empire of Manoj Chugh. And that's why the man's an absolute rock star. And without any further ado, Manoj Chugh, over to you. Thank you so much, sir, for gracing this occasion. If I'm looking like a fanboy, it's because I am.
But thank you very much, Faiz, and I'm truly honored. I think it's a very emotional moment for me because all my interactions with Faiz have been either over a weekly commit call where I'm yelling and shouting, or it's a quarterly business review meeting where I'm ready to pounce like a tiger if the numbers don't look anywhere close to being met, or in front of a customer when we can put on our charm and try and bring the deal home. But today is truly special because I am in this very informal chat with Faiz, and I'm going to be and I'm going to make sure it's going to be a bear it all kind of chat, if you will. It's been 4 decades, Faiz, and they've been very, very interesting 4 decades. And if I were to reminisce very quickly, when I graduated from campus from engineering school, I got this opportunity to work for the IT industry. Now, if I go back to the decade when I started, IBM had just left India at that time. The government of India had come out with some dilution norms, which obviously IBM didn't agree, and they decided to leave. And I think this was a tremendous opportunity for homegrown entrepreneurs to come in and set up what you could call IT firms in India. And I had the honor and opportunity of working for one to start with, which was co-founded by one of our seniors. So that's how my career began in an industry which I had not studied to join, but I was greatly enamored by the potential future. I worked for HCL for a bit, and then I moved to Wipro. I think if I look back at my generation of IT executives, I would perhaps be amongst the very few that worked both for HCL and Wipro. So I think in a way, I was able to imbibe the cultures of both of these startups of yesteryears. Of course, I was blessed and fortunate that both of them did incredibly well. 14 years at Wipro, and I got this opportunity to work for global tech firms. India was a closed economy when I started my career. In the early 90s, India liberalized its economy, and that's when a lot of tech firms were setting shop in India. I got the opportunity to work for this Atlanta-based firm, Scientific Atlanta, which was focused on satellite networks. So I moved from a computing business to satellite networks. After a few years, I was at Cisco building networks, and I think I was at the right place at the right time. Internet was just about taking off. And then it was EMC building out the information infrastructure. And perhaps I would say that I always lamented that maybe I had missed this boat of global IT services because we had such phenomenal players born out of India, which was serving global customers around all major markets. And I was almost lamenting, saying, look, I missed that opportunity till it came knocking on my doors. So I think I had my share there as well of working for one of the top IT services firms headquartered out of India. So it's been a fascinating journey, computing platform, systems integration, networks, information infrastructure, global IT services, Very, very exciting indeed.
Fascinating indeed, Manoj. Absolutely fascinating to see what you've done. If I may ask, because a lot of the audience watching this episode probably has started their career probably in the 2000s, probably some of them in the last 10 years. What's really changed from an Indian context over the last 4 decades? If you could probably help us understand what were the 80s like, the 90s, and then over the last 2 decades, I'd love to get your perspective there.
Well, if you talk to somebody of my vintage, they'll always say the 80s rock. I think every decade rocks. So if I were to go back to my first decade, from a computing perspective, it was clearly centered around mini computers. I think that is where the holy grail and battleground existed, certainly from an India perspective. And the mini computer wars were fought based on the microprocessor that powered them. So we spent many years battling between is Intel better, is Motorola better? And then there were these specialized ASICs as well, if you could call it, called reduced instruction set computing. So we fought all of these battles on nuances because it was all about how could you drive multi-user, multi-programming based systems driven by microprocessors. And mind you, at that point in time, we wrote our own operating systems. We wrote our own utilities. We did our own compilers. And then to top it all, we, of course, wrote our own applications. So that was a full stack of battleground that we used to fight with. So if you thought that you had convinced the customer that your computer was based on the right processor, then you started the battle on features of the operating system, ease of use, how stable, good were the applications, so on and so forth. So I think the first decade was really what I call the decade of the mini computer, and that's where we really focused. In my second decade, PCs had kind of shown up, and they had started proliferating in businesses as well. In Faiz, my experience has taught me that computing architectures typically follow how businesses serve customers. And in effect, it is therefore the customer who in a way really influences computing architectures, or what you could call how the world today looks at transformation. So as customers started becoming more and more aggressive and demanding, organizations realized that decision-making had to also move to the front end. No longer could you say, oh, well, I need to check with my boss, I need to go to my branch manager, et cetera, et cetera. The customer said, look, I need a response right now. So I think client-server computing defined the next decade of my career. And in a way, it was a very, very bold attempt by organizations to move decision-making to the front end, because you moved some of the computing capability and applications to the front end so that you could serve your customers better. My third decade was all about the internet. And boy, how did that change the world? It changed everything. The way we learned, the way we engaged with businesses, the way we got entertained. And certainly, we had to rewrite a lot of applications so that they were web-enabled. Again, if you come to think of it, it was about, are we serving our customers well enough? So I think customer centricity has been the holy grail of success of technology. And of course, in my fourth decade, it's all about digital and how that's transforming every facet of human existence. So that's been the 4 decades so far.
No, and it's amazing how you actually put this together, right? And there's this one point which I absolutely loved. It's a great takeaway. How probably in the 90s and even prior to that or after that, how consumer behavior eventually drives enterprise adoption and behavior, right? Because how the PC really developed into different habits. There's a lot of talk, Manoj, about an apparent recession is coming. And again, over the last 4 decades, you've seen your share of economic downturns, recessions. I think the Asian currency crisis in the 90s, the dot-com bust early 2000, 9/11 happened, created a ripple effect of sorts. Then 2008 happened, and after that, it's been a massive upward tick. And then COVID happened a couple of years back and still continues to hurt us, right? What is your advice for business leaders, for CIOs, just the overall community, to deal with these times, which are clearly unpredictable and sometimes very, very daunting?
Faiz, I've learned through my experience that every crisis brings forward new opportunities. And I think technology can play a very, very important role in many different ways. I mean, if you just look at digital and how the world is going to get shaped going forward in the future, there are three fundamental pivots around which businesses will have to embrace digital. The first is around how can digital technologies help me to optimize my current operations? How can it help me to reduce cost? How can I automate more? And therefore, how can I become better at what I'm doing today? The second is in terms of customer engagement. How do you go about reaching out to new sets of customers? And I think the mobile phone has provided that opportunity for new generation of customers to engage with businesses, something which has never, ever, ever happened before in the past. So I think improved customer engagement and the ability to reach out to newer sets of customers, newer cohorts, if you will, is second to none. It's never existed before. And third is an opportunity for many of us to perhaps drive new businesses which are founded on digital. I think when we start looking at the future, and yes, the economy will go up and down, the GDP will go up and down, but the reality of life is technology will always continue to help both the government and business to become more efficient and be even more ready to face the future. I think for all of us, in the technology space, we should just keep our heads down. We should just continue to serve our customers in the best possible fashion. And I'm sure that, as they say, tough times don't last, tough folks do. We will get over any future potential challenge as well. So I'd say remain optimistic. We guys have weathered it over the last so many years. I'm sure that if we help deploy technology in the right way, we will be able to help the planet going forward in the future as well.
I love it. I absolutely love what you said, right? Tough times don't last, tough people do. And if I may take a leaf out of what you said, a lot of times the trust and credibility you build today always comes in handy when the going gets tough, right? So if you're being honest, helping your customers scale, I'm sure you'll have their support in abundance when probably there's an economic downturn or otherwise. Manoj, you've been a huge supporter of India shining. You've built your entire your career in the country. You've been here the last 4 decades. I know a lot of your peers probably flew out for different opportunities globally. You stayed put. You've spoken at length about bringing thousands and thousands of jobs back into India. You've been a flag bearer of sorts that India is indeed shining, and more importantly, it's absolutely worth it for top talent to stay back in India. How does that thought process of yours hold today?
Well, I think I'm even more optimistic today than I ever was. And actually, you're always shaped by how you see things unfolding in front of your own eyes. And I go back to my college days. I remember my final year, my final semester. Frantically, many of my classmates used to be keeping awake through the night, filling up. In those days, there were physical application forms for scholarships, in universities overseas. And it was almost with vengeance that everyone was filling up those applications. When I turned around, I thought maybe I was amongst the few guys who was not doing it, or maybe something was wrong with me. But it never tugged me in the heart saying, get up and go overseas and get a scholarship. And I think the reason why many of my classmates, many of my batchmates and friends did this was because they found better opportunities for themselves and their families in the future, right, overseas. They perhaps felt that the quality of jobs after a good engineering degree were few and far between. And therefore, I think from their own perspective, they had studied hard, they had got to where they were, and they truly felt that they deserved better. And they looked at this as a ticket to a better quality of life. No quarrels at all. I think everyone has a right to make their choice. But I think that stayed in my mind, and it disturbed me a lot. Later years, when I started working for the tech sector, particularly the global product technology firms, I found a huge opportunity. And the opportunity I found was to leverage the talent from India to help these firms build world-class products if they were able to combine the strength of what our talent brought and what they were doing in home office. And I think this was the mantra that I felt perhaps could in a way be a turning point and be a win-win. A win for certainly the global product technology firm, and a big win for good engineers who want to stay back or wanted to stay back in India. And I think I was blessed and fortunate that I was able to convince two of the large global product tech firms that I worked with over the years to make those investments in India. And I can tell you, Faiz, it was not easy. Convincing anyone in head office, and you know this as much as me, to sign a small check of a few $100 million is not easy. And certainly not when you're reminded that your KRA is actually to drive revenue. And so I think from my perspective, my commitment was, of course, I will continue to drive revenue, grow the business, but there is a huge opportunity to leverage the talent from India for greater good. And I felt it was greater good for the entire planet because one would get world-class products through the efforts of these engineers. And I think that that is something which I felt incredibly proud of. Today, there are many, many, many global centers of excellence in India. And there are hundreds of thousands of jobs that have got created, and high quality jobs. And that is where my focus was. How do we get our best engineers to stay back in India and contribute to the world? So I think if in a small way, I have been able to put a brick in the wall, I feel very blessed and fortunate. And I think I also feel very blessed and fortunate to then bring new world technologies from an academia perspective in terms of partnerships, so that newer generations of kids that are coming into the workplace also understand how they could perhaps shape the future. So I think it was partnerships with academia and industry, which I'm a big, big fan of, and the huge number of jobs that we were able to create and bring to India. And my message always to my corporate folks was, you may be coming to India for cost, you will stay for quality, but you will invest for innovation. And I think today we have reached that point where everyone who's coming to India recognizes that we can innovate from here.
Wow. Wow. So articulate. And I think no one could have probably explained it better than you did. And I've personally been a part of two organizations which have been so heavily invested in India. In the last 12 years, I spent 6 years in EMC, where Manoj, of course, led us for a large amount of the time, brought, again, thousands of people, largely engineers, to work out of India, build a center of excellence, which was a landmark in itself. There was a time when that entire locality was recognized as the EMC office, right? And of course, with Nutanix now, Manoj, again, I'm so proud to be a part of Nutanix, large center of excellence, hundreds and hundreds of engineers, the support team. Again, there's so much of innovation happening out of India. It just couldn't be. And again, I say this for all the people who are watching this episode, who probably wondering, where's the future lying? Well, it's lying right around the corner. You just need to look a little more carefully, right? I'm going to ask you a question which I think a lot of us want to know. I personally want to know. 4 decades of excellence. What's next? What's on the plate for Manoj Chugh for the next decade?
Well, I think, Faiz, for anyone who's been in technology all these years, it's difficult to go and do something else. Of course, we all learned a few new skills during the pandemic. For one, I learned how to make a good cup of tea because I knew I had to do it on my own. But I think that certainly I find the future even more exciting. Just look at India, look at startups. I think just look at how well-funded these startups are and the opportunity that they have to attract the best minds to come and work with them. Second is, you look at the platforms that are getting built out of India today. We could never, ever have imagined population scale platforms being engineered from India. In fact, for many years, Faiz, you would remember, when we would go in front of customers, they would say, no, don't give us an example of or a case study of a customer from India. right? Give us someone, a global customer, right? Someone who's done very complex work, very high volumes. And today the answer is, of course, whether you like it or not, it's an Indian customer. So I think things have changed very dramatically, where you don't have to start quoting case studies from country A, B, or C. They all exist in India. So I think the next 10 years are going to be incredibly fascinating in our country. India will be one of the top global economies over the next 10 years. What we are doing in technology is second to none. Our buoyant startup ecosystem. And let us not forget, we may have failings, but the strong foundation of democracy that we have, all put together, create an unbeatable combination for doing even more out here in India.
And again, as we come to the end of the episode, Manoj, an absolute masterclass from you. India is indeed shining. We are all beneficiaries of what this country's done. We see thousands and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of folks across the country, across cities, across tier 2 cities, making a mark. We've got entrepreneurs, unicorn startups, which are again starting from different parts of the country. And I think indeed India is shining. But what's very, very special amongst all that shining is the little star called Manoj Chugh, who keeps shining over the last 4 decades and continues to be an inspiration for all of us. As I said at the start of the episode, pardon the fanboy smile, pardon the nervousness in the voice. It's all because I've looked up to you all along. And as I said, I just probably sharing what many, many thousands of others feel like when they think and talk about the only Manoj Chugh. Manoj, absolute honor as always to have you, speaking to you. And I'm sure this masterclass will be heard multiple times over and a lot of great takeaways from this. Thank you so much. And final word to you, Manoj.
Thank you very much, Faiz. I'm truly honored. I can tell you, as I said at the beginning, this is a truly emotional moment for me. I have been greatly honored to have had this opportunity of working with fantastic colleagues like you. I truly believe that we have world-class talent in our country. We can do the impossible. We have a huge opportunity in front of us. And I do hope that the next decade, we can truly put our hand on our heart and say that each one of us has made a difference to the lives of 1 billion people. Thank you very much, Faiz. Wish you all the very best. Power to you and a lot of it to you.
Thank you so much, Manoj. Absolute honor and pleasure.